One of the creatures that exists in our waters, particularly later in the season, is something that not too many fishermen in the Northeast, at least, are aware of, and that's a thing called a mantis shrimp, which is more of a free-swimming and slightly predatory member of the family uh, that includes all of the grass shrimp that we see in the shallows and in weeds in salt water. Uh, but a mantis shrimp is certainly preyed on by all of the inshore predators that we are familiar with, in particular striped bass or bluefish, uh, weakfish, or any of the things that we might normally see in this part of the country. Uh, they are well known in more tropical climates, and the patterns that work there, with some variation in cases, work very well in this part of the country as well. We're going to start off dealing with this particular creature with a thing called a big ugly, which is is a variant, or at least I've made a variant of the tropical patterns so that it's a bit more attractive in this part of the world. You may find mantis shrimp in sizes that could be imitated all the way from a number 6 hook size well on up to probably a 1/0. There's no reason to believe that they're always going to be tiny. They're not. And that's one of the reasons that they might be attractive to even fairly large striped bass. This particular imitation uses a pink thread or floss to make the basis of the body, and that comes right from the tropical imitations as well as the general color found on parts of the shrimp's body. And take the thread back to the point where it bisects the point of the hook and the back edge of the barb to start this fly off. And then we're going to take a bit of craft fur, which is just plastic fiber, to make a tail on this fly. Unlike a lot of tropical patterns which have very short tails, this one is going to be longer, more streamer fly-like, if you will, starting off looking more like a baitfish imitation than it does some kind of crustacean. But it is what the creature really looks like, and this part of the shrimp's body moves as it swims. So we'll just take some craft fur and we'll tie it in back here at the back edge of the hook, and then tie all of that extra material right down to the hook shank. That does a couple of things. It beefs up the body size a little bit, and it also secures everything down nice and tightly. Now, in the real mantis shrimp, this part of the body is segmented. So to imitate that, we're just going to take a Sharpie permanent marker, and we're going to just make some stripes. Top and bottom of this extended tail. And there is our segmented body. Now they have some legs or swimmerettes that move around as they move through the water. And one of the best ways to imitate that in these modern versions is with rubber legs. And we'll make them out of something that's kind of exciting to look at, particularly if you're something that eats shrimp. And we'll take as many of these as we think practical. Let's take 2 full length here, and we'll just cut them off with these great big scissors. These heavy scissors that I use get a comment every now and then, and they're most useful in cutting odd materials that might dull normal fly tying scissors. But what I'm going to do is just take this and I'm going to make them longer than the tail and put them in place on either side of the tail material that I tied in and tie all that down. And you can do this at any stage before you put the final covering on the body, but we're going to again leave material extending along the shank of the hook so we can tie this stuff down, again building up the body. One of the reasons for building the body up that much is that we are going to put a set of dumbbell eyes on the fly, which is no more than weight. And figure eight those in place. Once you get them in place, one of the things that you want to do is make sure that they don't move around too much, and they stay put. And by going underneath the eyes on both sides, back and forth, and then figure eighting nice and tightly in both directions again, what you do is pull thread in to really tighten the position that those eyes take. Another thing that's a good practice is to put a drop of cement on the thread, and I like to put a little drop on the body as well, and just sort of let that sit as I go forward. We're going to take a little root beer. You can use a chenille or a cactus chenille, anything, but a kind of a root beery color. With the thread moved back to the base of the tail, the base of where we've tied in those swimmerette type legs, you could tie that material down and bring your thread right up behind the eyes. And then right over that wet head cement, you can make wraps of this chenille right up tight behind the eyes, and then take a couple of turns of thread and cut off the excess. And then move your thread up in front of the eyes. Then we're going to turn the fly over. And go back to our first material, craft fur, and take another clump. And you'll see what I meant when I said that this was more streamer-like, because these swimming shrimp, and you won't find them sitting, they move around. You're going to try to make this pretty much as long as the tail, where it ties in. You might have a little too much length. Let's cut that excess piece off. And placing it over the hook point, divided in half, so that you get half on either side. Tie it down in front, in back, and then build up ahead with a couple of turns in between the eyes to firmly lock this material down. Build a nice, neat little head in the front. tie the fly off, add a drop of head cement, let that saturate your tying thread, and you have a nice swimming shrimp pattern with lots of movement as it goes through the water. And yes, this will take striped bass, and yes, it could be this long and still imitate the same creature.